Let's take you now to Afghanistan, where two suicide bombers and gunmen targeted crowds massing near the Kabul airport in the waning days of a massive airlift that has drawn thousands of people seeking to flee the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. According to reports, at least 13 people were killed and 15 wounded. A U.S. official said the complex attack was definitely believed to have been carried out by the Islamic State group, whose affiliates in Afghanistan grew out of these affected Taliban members who hold an even more extreme view of Islam. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby also confirmed the blast, saying one was near an airport entrance and another was a short distance away by a hotel. Members of the U.S. military are reportedly amongst the wounded.
Now, this explosion seems to have happened by the Abbey Gate. Now, that's a gate that's a little northeast of the main gate for the civilian terminal. And you have to keep in mind that the Taliban has sort of been surrounding this airfield and kind of keeping people away as best they can. We saw today people being sprayed with fire hoses by the Taliban. There were also tear gas used to try to drive some of the crowds away. And that came as European nations, as well as the United States, had warned of the danger of a possible terror attack targeting those who had gathered outside of the airport. Well, as of right now, no one's claimed responsibility for this explosion at Kabul airport. That being said, the Taliban, during its march across Afghanistan, did free prisoners across the country. And some of those prisoners that were held were members of the local Islamic State affiliate, the Khorasan province. These guys are very extreme. Some of them are disaffected Taliban that joined IS because they thought the Taliban were too soft. Most notably in 2020, they attacked a maternity, shot to death babies, pregnant women. So that is sort of the force that you're talking about when you speak about the Islamic State in Afghanistan. That being said, they're nowhere near as organized as the Taliban as a political force or as a militant force, but they are still able to wreak havoc, and in this case, a lot of the Western governments, including the U.S., had been warning that they thought Islamic State would take advantage of the situation that was going on now.
All right, Arise U.S. correspondent KARL BOSTIC joins us now for more on this. Thank you so much, KARL. Good to see you. Well, the U.S. authorities seem to believe this suicide bombing was carried out by the Islamic State. What are you learning?
Well, good evening. Already, the Islamic State, they have released a statement claiming responsible for this attack, and we're now waiting for President Biden to address this rapid, tragic turn of events. You know, he had set up an August 31st deadline to evacuate all Americans by August 31st. In part, that date or decision was driven by the fact that there was a threat of terror attacks like what happened today. So when he speaks very shortly, the big question is whether or not he'll still carry out on that deadline, August 31st, to evacuate all Americans and all Afghans, as many as possible, as they say, who work with the U.S., or will he actually extend the deadline beyond August 31st? Because even last week he said if any Americans were killed or injured, any American casualties, it would be a response that would be met swiftly and forcefully. So a lot of people are very angry about what transpired today because this is the biggest loss of life, well, the first loss of life of American soldiers since February 2020, when 2 were killed, and the biggest loss of life in recent memory of American casualties in a single day.
Yeah.
Well, KARL, do you think that this attack by ISIS is capable of extending the time frame of the U.S. military forces in Afghanistan? Or is it capable of drawing them again into another war to probably clear the remnants of ISIS? KARL?
Well, that's what's really very interesting. Earlier today, you had the commander in charge of U.S. forces in Afghanistan, General McKenzie, saying that the mission will continue, and that mission is to evacuate all Americans from Afghanistan that want to leave. Right now, they estimate about 1,000 or 1,500 are still left in Afghanistan. 500 are perhaps making their way to the airport if it's safe enough. So that's still 1,000 out there. The question remains, Do they stay until the mission's accomplished, or do they simply draw the line on August 31st? And he was kind of very vague in his response about, do they need more troops, whatever. And he says, we have whatever troops or assets we need to complete this mission right now. They've already evacuated about 500 military personnel, U.S. troops from the airport. So now it's about 5,000. So really, it's a wait and see thing in terms of how President Biden responds to this, because this is the very reason why he wanted to get U.S. troops and citizens as soon as possible to prevent any further bloodshed. And instead, now we find days before this deadline, this horrific attack. Then it's weeks before the anniversary of the 9/11 attack. So this is a really tragic moment for Americans to take in, mixed with anger, grief, and heartbreak.
Yes, indeed. And Carl, you just mentioned that Joe Biden is being awaited in terms of how he'll respond to this. But from your standpoint, how do you think the American president will, respond to this rather tragic situation? And bearing in mind that the Taliban had said to the U.S., you cannot stay a day longer than the August 31 deadline. Is this a threat that the Taliban has carried out as a sign of its seriousness?
It's not a threat. It's not a threat that the Taliban carried out. Remember, ISIS, they're independent of the Taliban. In fact, they're a rival of the Taliban. But see, there again, this also has to do with how U.S. prestige and power is seen worldwide. Is the U.S. giving in to demands by effectively a terrorist group to set the deadlines? Because just listening to cable broadcast today in social media, a lot of anger out there amongst military veterans, hardliners, not only from the Republican Party, but also the Democratic Party, saying, who is the Taliban to issue deadlines to the American government, the most powerful country in the world? That's August 31st or else. We're the ones who not only decide when we leave, but if we have to go out and kill those people responsible for that, we will also go after those people and we'll kill them as well. And we'll decide when we leave. But the real, decision or juggling act is this exposed for the American lives at risk.
And of course, Russia has actually, expressed concerns that things could escalate to a civil war in Afghanistan. Is that looking likely?
Well, yes. I mean, there is a possibility there of civil war because the Taliban doesn't have total control over Afghanistan. You have a rump group in the north, in the northern part of Afghanistan. So that's why this could still unfold into more tragic violence because Taliban is still trying to consolidate control.
All right, KARL BOSTIC, our special correspondent in the U.S., thanks so very much for speaking to us on the latest in the Kabul bombings in Afghanistan. KARL BOSTIC, yeah.